The Kansas City Chiefs are one step closer to the number one seed in the AFC West, or in the AFC, pardon me, and a bye week in the playoffs. They need one win in their final two games or one Bills loss, and that would wrap things up for this team and allow them some breathing room going into the final week of the season and having sole ownership of that number one seed. And the Super Bowl, the road to the Super Bowl would run through Kansas City. I have here 6 big ideas worth talking about, 8 offensive points worth talking about, and 4 defensive points worth talking about. And yes, there are absolutely more important places to start, but we have to start with Petty LaVon. Petty LaVon rides again. Petty LaVon strikes again. The absolute stupidity that someone has to just embody in order to talk smack about the Kansas City Chiefs at this point. Why do it? Why take that risk? Why rile them up? Why do it at all? There's no point. You are only ensuring your own downfall. Patrick Mahomes was on, we think, a bum ankle. By all, observable facts, a bum ankle, and decided he was just going to have his longest rushing touchdown of the regular season, right? And lead the Chiefs in rushing in the first half because you don't think he can do it. So, I mean, just absolutely ignominious from the Tim Settle Jr. fella. The number 2 thing here is one more win wraps up the 1 seed or one more Bills loss. I know I already mentioned this, but it has to be considered. It has to be talked about. It has to be at the forefront of the entire organization's mind that should the Bills lose today, or should they simply beat the Steelers on Christmas Day, that final week of the season is played however the Kansas City Chiefs like it. Could they take the whole week off and have 2 bye weeks heading into the playoffs? Yes, they could. I don't think they will do that, especially because the offense is welcoming back new players. The offense is shuffling so many players around the offensive line. I think that they would treat it like a preseason game. If they have the number 1 seed and the Week 18 game against the Broncos is optional, I think they would come out and play the first half. That's what I think would happen. Perhaps less than that, but I do think they would suit up. I think that Andy Reid would make them go through a week of practice thinking they were going to be on the field, if nothing else, and then the game plan could change that day. The third point here is something always worth considering. Whenever you see an injury like what it is that we just saw, we may have seen the encapsulation of a player's entire career. If that knee injury is what was rumored on Twitter, and I have had no update since the game, we may have seen the last of Tank Dell. That is unfortunate. That is sad. That sucks, right? That sucks. He was someone who was succeeding against all odds. That's always someone. I know the Kansas City area loves to root for someone like that. Tank Dell was around 107 pounds of NFL player. His pads weighed more than he did. So something like this was always absolutely a risk. And it happened. And that sucks. The next thing to talk about here, the Texans and the Ravens are playoff teams. And the Chiefs beat them both. Right now, the Chargers and Broncos are both also playoff teams. The Chiefs have 2 wins against the Chargers and a win against the Broncos. That's 5 wins against playoff teams right there. The Steelers are the 3 seed in the AFC side of the bracket as things stand right now. The Steelers are, should the Kansas City Chiefs beat them, on a 3-game losing streak. So things are going less than superb in Pittsburgh. But should the Chiefs beat them, that would be another guaranteed playoff team over whom they have a win. I did not look at the NFC side of the bracket. I do not think the NFC side of the bracket is particularly compelling outside of Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Detroit. The Chiefs' only loss this season is to the number 2 seed Buffalo Bills, who themselves have lost 3 games on the season. The Chiefs have lost 1 time. The Bills have lost thrice. To put up the argument that the Kansas City Chiefs are not the class of the AFC this year at this point is simply ridiculous. The argument cannot be made. It cannot be perpetuated. You can do it. You can say the words, but they don't actually mean anything. They don't actually go anywhere. At every level, this Kansas City Chiefs team is the best team in the AFC. This Kansas City Chiefs team is the most deserving of the number 1 seed. The Chiefs, the next talking point here, the Chiefs have matched the most wins they have ever had in a season, all 3 occasions of the Chiefs having 14 wins. The only in franchise history have been under Patrick Mahomes. Before Patrick Mahomes, 13 was the most wins they had ever had. The Chiefs now have 14 wins with 2 games, to go. The Chiefs could hypothetically win 16 games this season. Say they beat the Steelers, because the foot will be on the gas in that game, I do believe. The Chiefs have beaten the Broncos with their backups before. The Chiefs have beaten the Broncos with their backups in Week 18 before. Who's to say it couldn't happen this time? And it's a down year, right? This is a down year, we keep hearing, for the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, here's the miserable point to that. If this is a down year, everybody better enjoy it while they can. Because if this is a down year, it's going to get ugly. And the last thing to talk about on the big ideas is this. This team is peaking at the right time. We've talked about it through this season. We've talked about how some of their wins looked messy. Why don't they just run the ball here? We've talked about, hey, why don't they just do X, Y, and Z here? And sometimes the reason for that is they don't have to. That's not what they're working on now. Sounds superfluous, sounds stupid. You can tell me that I'm wrong and the NFL doesn't act that way. The NFL doesn't operate that way. You can't go to practice on Sundays. You'll lose in the NFL. Well, then explain to me what it is that we've been seeing here in Kansas City. How it is that all of a sudden at the end of the season, these Kansas City Chiefs are putting together constituent parts of what it is we've seen them work on all the livelong year. All of a sudden, Xavier Worthy is doing some of the running that we saw him do early in the year. Xavier Worthy is doing the crossing routes that we saw him do later in the season. Xavier Worthy is getting some targets down the field like he did around the early middle season. All of a sudden, he's getting all of that done at the same time. Samaje Perine. All of a sudden, that screen game, that dump-off game is clicking at the right time. Just all of a sudden, that happens to be happening. All of a sudden, once again, your third-string cornerback is getting sacks the way that it happened last year. Sacks coming from everywhere. All of a sudden, these things happen to be clicking into place week 16, week 15, week 14 of the season. This is the best this team has looked all together, I think, this year. The Ravens game was pretty good, but that was a super hype event. That was prior to a lot of injuries. There were a lot of different players on that team. It strikes me that the Kansas City Chiefs are putting together pieces of their game as the season goes on, and right now all of those pieces are falling into place just in time to hit the playoffs. The same way that it did the last 2 seasons. And fun fact, spoiler alert, I don't know if you knew this about the last 2 seasons, but all of the Kansas City Chiefs got rings at the end of those seasons. Offensive notes. This is the best that Patrick Mahomes has looked this season, in my opinion. 293 yards of total offense, 260 passing yards, 33 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 passing, 1 rushing, no turnovers. This is absolutely the type of performance that it takes to win in the playoffs. The Texans are a playoff team, don't forget that. Texans cemented in the playoffs right now. Playoffs start today, Texans are in there. Nothing can knock them out the next 2 weeks. That's sort of the saddest part about losing Tank Dell the way they lost Tank Dell. They're not really going to change much for themselves. They're in the playoffs. So Patrick Mahomes comes out and has a playoff performance. In the same way that we saw him in the playoffs last season, all of a sudden decide to start running. Oh, you want to cover everybody? All right, I'll run it right up the gut. I'll get down. I'll get out of bounds. But I'm going to run it right up the gut. You are going to have to account for that. Now, maybe you have to spy. And if you do, somebody's open. Hollywood Brown is real. 5 catches, 45 yards, and some big-time moments for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the way the offense was supposed to look all along. This is the offense they have been building. They could have scored on that final drive. They could have hit 30. That's a good defense. This team, as it is currently constructed, is the best we have seen all season. I don't know too many times they looked this good last year. I mean, this was an 8-point win, sure. And there were some things that didn't go quite right. There were some wonky things here and there. But guys, did you ever doubt the Kansas City Chiefs in this game? Was this game ever out of control or wild? No. It's exactly what you expect to see. Xavier Worthy continues to get better. 7 catches, 65 yards, and a touchdown. 3 carries, 10 yards. In the first 9 weeks of the season, Xavier Worthy eclipsed 40 receiving yards just twice. I believe it was a 42-yard game and a 73-yard game. Twice in the first 9 weeks of the season, he went over 40 yards. He's now done that for 6 consecutive weeks. Xavier Worthy is putting everything together when he absolutely has to. He's going to be a weapon in the playoffs. We hear every year, oh, this is the team no one wants to see in January. This is the team no one wants to see in January. Guys, that's the Chiefs. It's the Chiefs. It's going to be the Chiefs. DeAndre Hopkins has not been Rashee Rice. He has not been what Rashee Rice could have been. He has not been what Rashee Rice was planned on being in this offense, but he's not. DeAndre Hopkins is not who he has been. But DeAndre Hopkins has become the third down guy / first down machine that Patrick Mahomes has never had. All Mahomes has to do is place the ball, and Hopkins is going to convert the down. Hopkins has never played football as meaningful as he is likely to see here in Kansas City. Hopkins has never had a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. This is going to be, if all of these pieces operate like they can, this is going to be something special. And notice, I'm not talking about Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce had another ho-hum game. Travis Kelce during a ho-hum season. There is a note in here about Travis Kelce, but it has nothing to do with his receiving. Surprise. One more thing. I do not have numbers on this, but that has to be the most 15-plus yard plays this offense has had in a game this season. Not 20, I don't think. I don't remember how many different 20-yard plays they had. There were quite a few that were 10, 15, 17-yard plays. That has to be the most explosive this offense has been this season. Nico Remigio, by the way, 2 offensive snaps in this game. Week 18, here we come, baby. Nico Remigio will be wide receiver 1 come Week 18 should the Kansas City Chiefs have that playoff spot locked down. And I am excited to see that. The Chiefs, purely by serendipity, may have accidentally found their left tackle for the playoffs in Joe Thuney, may have accidentally found their right tackle for the playoffs in Wanya Morris. Wanya Morris looked like a man reborn on the right side of the line. Remember, that's where he played in college. He had to play there in college because I think the guy that was their left tackle went top 10, right? So, yeah, Wanya Morris looks, to me, I'm not the offensive line guru. I'm not an expert on anything. Wanya Morris looked completely different, looked completely capable off of that right half, right side, right offensive tackle part of the line. So, Jawan Taylor's a lot of money to be sitting on the bench, but if it makes the Kansas City Chiefs better, I don't think they'll be afraid to do it. Here's the note on Travis Kelce. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just making things up through the jubilation of a win. Perhaps I am just euphoric. Travis Kelce looked much more aggressive as a blocker than I have ever seen him. Now, the one thing that it seems he still has a whole lot of trouble doing is when there's a run to the left, for example, and Travis Kelce is on the right half of the line, what defensive ends in the NFL will do, if it's a run left, all of the offensive linemen start running left. The defensive end's job is to crash down the line. You just beeline right down the line, and you're probably going to run into a running back. He does nothing against that. He does not care. And that defensive end makes the tackle a lot. But it seemed that he was much more into the blocking aspects of things in this game than I think I've ever seen him. And if it is that it has gotten into his head that this is how I have to contribute to this team in order for the team to make headway in the playoffs, I have to go back. I have to put the backpack back on, go back to school, and do all of these little coinky-dink things. If he has bought back into that level, okay. He has right now 776 yards, I believe, something like that. A good season for a tight end. It's not a Travis Kelce season, right? So this is going to be a down year for Travis Kelce, but still a stellar tight end season. So if this happens to be when the offense starts to pivot away from the Travis Kelce experience, I guess that's when it has to be. I'm not I haven't looked at his targets, so maybe there's something in the targets with the way that Mahomes has been more erratic with ball placement. Maybe he's getting the same amount of targets, but just not converting them into receptions. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But not a bad way to go out with consecutive Super Bowls and a chance at a third, if that is what ends up happening with Travis Kelce. I remain of the opinion that he will probably play through next season to match the number of years that his older brother had in the league, because he seems to have so much admiration for Jason. Defensive notes, only 4 notes. Trent McDuffie is becoming a ball hawk, and that is very difficult to do when you are targeted as seldom as is Trent McDuffie. So, interceptions in consecutive weeks and being absolutely shut down except for when a tight end pushes off of you in the end zone and it does not get called and you give up a touchdown in that way. But McDuffie is a lockdown corner. You have to have at least one in the playoffs, I think, to be able to make any type of noise at all. The other good thing for this defensive secondary, Jaden Hicks is an animal. Jaden Hicks is somehow all over the place. Jaden Hicks makes big plays. He played only 34 snaps. Without checking, that might be the most defense he has ever played. Found a way to get an interception on it. I would be elated to see this defense play Jaden Hicks on a more consistent basis. Even if he is a rookie, this is where Chamari Connor started getting a lot more reps last season and ended up playing some pretty good football in the playoffs. So having a fully loaded Jaden Hicks primed and ready to go in the playoffs, I think could be absolutely massive, because Trent McDuffie needs another playmaker on that back end of the defense. The defense reverted to their season average in this game on sacks. Omenihu had them the past 2 games at 4 sacks per game as opposed to their season average of 2, but fell back down to 2 sacks, ended up with 2 turnovers, which leads me into the last talking point here. The defensive line may have only produced 2 sacks, but they look more immediate and they look more dynamic to me. This defensive line is getting push in a way that they had not before. Chris Jones does not seem to be as perturbed by the double teams, etc. It seems that the addition of Charles Omenihu off of that IR is everything that we hoped it would be and everything that it was last year without the sack numbers adding up. Remember, when he came back from suspension last season, he was just an animal immediately, getting sacks and accumulating those types of statistics. Has not been the case yet this year, but he has opened things up for everyone around him on that defensive line. So anyway, guys, this is the game review for the game against the Texans. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And I hope to have you back for the next one.